I love politics. I don't love the hate and the vitriol and the divisiveness and all of that, but I love politics, and here's the reason why. Because politics is leadership on full display. Politics is leadership lived out at the highest level. And what we know is that leadership is influence. And so the people who can influence the best are generally the ones who do well in politics. They're the ones who get elected. And so whether you like them or not, whether you agree with them or not, you have to recognize that people in high positions of political influence really do demonstrate a tremendous amount of leadership. And we want to talk about that today, about looking at politics through the lens of leadership. And I know, maybe already in these first few seconds, maybe you're bristling a little bit or kind of bracing for what's coming. Take a deep breath. This is not about taking political positions or sides or any of that. It's just about saying, hey, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, there's an awful lot we can learn if we're willing to observe what's happening in the political landscape in our country, particularly this last election cycle. I know this could be a little bit controversial, but we're not ones to shy away from it, so let's dive in. Welcome to the Shift Podcast. I'm Matt Ware with my co-host Evan Weiland, and we're at the beautiful, amazing Uva Wine Bar in North Colorado Springs. Big shout out to these guys, an amazing space and really gracious hosts. So if you're in the area, you want to find a new place to get some wine, get some food, this is a great spot. We'd love to recommend that to you. Evan, this is going to be a really fun, maybe slightly controversial or kind of hot topic episode. What are your thoughts on this as we kick off?
I mean, I'm okay to ruffle some feathers. That's what we're here for.
Right.
Because entrepreneurs can learn so much from the 2024 election cycle. We have to talk about it. And that's not a political statement. I think it's just a leadership statement.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, politics is leadership in its rawest form. And so whether you like the candidate or not, I think we can learn a lot. We can glean from it and unpack it. The ability to influence, to rally people and create vision is going to contribute directly to their success. And of course to the nation's success.
Right.
And so those who understand their audience, they can communicate clearly and lead with confidence. They're going to be the one who wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think we'll keep saying it, right? But I think it's important to say this is not about advocating for a particular party or position or any of that. In fact, I'm a registered independent, right?
Sweet.
Which means I, hopefully can think for myself.
Think for yourself.
Right, make good decisions. But I think we would also say, like we recognize nobody comes to a conversation like this without bias. Like nobody's unbiased. That's actually one of the most ridiculous things to say. We're all biased. I don't think being biased is the problem. I think you just own your bias. Like you recognize where it comes from. That's part of being self-aware. But I think when we're talking about this specifically, we just recognize that a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, we didn't just come up with them, from like in a vacuum, right? Like there are really smart people smarter than us on both sides of the aisle who have made these kinds of observations. We just feel like there's a value in taking some of those things and translating that for our audience, if you're watching or listening, into the business world, right? Because so many of these principles, they transfer over. And again, I just see everything through the lens of leadership. That's my bias. My bias is leadership. And I don't know why. I was raised in that environment. I'm sure that has something to do with it, right? Nature and nurture. I started cutting my teeth on John Maxwell books when I was in high school, and he was the one. Walk. Yeah, right before I could walk. Right? Not quite. I was walking in high school, but thanks. But yeah, very early on, like these were massive influences for me, and so I still just process the world that way. And of course, Maxwell, one of his most famous statements is that everything rises and falls on leadership. And that sounds very like a big generalization, a big stereotype. And just the older I've gotten and the more experienced I get, I just think it's true. I think everything rises and falls on leadership. We see that in the political world. We're seeing that in the nation. I think we see it play out in business. In fact, years ago, this is probably 20-ish years ago, I actually worked for Starbucks. I was in a management role for Starbucks for about a year. And my district manager, Nick Dillard, learned so much from him. He would always say when he would walk into a store or we would have these, district meetings or whatever, if there was ever a problem of any kind, didn't matter what the problem was, his immediate default answer was, that's a lack of leadership.
Oh, wow.
Because he had just been trained to see everything through that leadership lens. So if there's a problem, it's a lack of leadership, because everything rises and falls on leadership. So what we're going to do today is talk through just 5 observations, 5 key takeaways that we have from the 2024 election cycle that are leadership lessons that we think can be applied and translated into the business world.
Yeah, I can't wait. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so leadership lesson number 1 is know your base. Know your base. And I think we'd all have to agree, if Trump knows anything, he knows his base.
Yeah.
He knows what his base wants. He knows what they're looking for, and he knows how to appeal to them.
In the business sense, that's your customers, your clients, your stakeholders. And when you know how to appeal to these people, and you know how to craft your message appropriately, it's going to be a big win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that raises the question, well, how do you know your base? How do you know what your customers, clients, stakeholders, how do you know what they want? And I would say it comes down to 2 things. It comes down to data and intuition.
Okay.
You've got to have data, and you've got to have intuition around these things. Let's start with data. I mean, how do you get data? Well, polls and surveys and customer feedback and reviews and all those kind of things. I think too many business leaders don't really look for feedback.
Agreed.
Or they overlook the feedback that they're getting. And what I've come to learn is that feedback is actually everywhere if we learn how to look for it and we learn how to glean it. There's an incredible book called Thanks for the Feedback that I would throw out here as a recommendation. Probably one of my top 10 like business or leadership books of all time, as well as actually it impacts personal relationships as well. But one of the big premises of this book is that feedback is all around. Feedback is happening all the time. You've got to train yourself to look for it and know how to pay attention to it. When a customer comes to you one time but doesn't come back, that's actually a form of feedback.
Nice.
When they leave a good review or a bad review, right? That's a form of feedback. If you're in the service industry, if they tip big or they tip small, that's a form of feedback. When a client starts dodging your calls or won't reply to your emails, that's feedback. You start this new diet and you start losing weight. That's a form of feedback. You ask somebody out on a date and they don't say no, but you can't really pin them down on a day and time. That's actually a form of feedback. So, again, personal, professional, all these different ways. If we learn to look for it, this data is coming to us. We've just got to be trained to know how to get it and how to interpret it.
Yeah, and apparently not all feedback feels good, according to your dating example.
Right, well, and that's true. Not all feedback feels good. The bad review that gets dropped on Google for your business doesn't feel good in the moment. Even if they were completely wrong, even if you could refute every single thing that they're saying, that feedback still feels hard.
Sure.
But that's actually the data you need to grow and improve as a business leader and to know the base than the market that you're trying to reach. The other thing, to be able to know your base, data, and then also intuition. And we've actually talked about intuition on the podcast before. 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, John Maxwell, probably his all-time greatest book. He talks about this, how this is a law that leaders have to understand. Leaders have to have intuition, which you typically do in the areas that you're gifted in, the areas that you're talented in. And I think, again, whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not, you just have to understand Trump had a tremendous amount of intuition about what his base wanted and ultimately what the majority of the country wanted.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump ultimately won the election on 2 major issues, right? And that was the border and inflation. And so this is a really good example of knowing your base. Those were the most important issues to the majority of Americans, right? To voters. And the numbers are in.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, he was just very intuitive that those were the 2 things that were going to be the most important to win the election. And so he knew that based on the data, based on his intuition, these are the issues I can run on, and these are the issues I can win on. So know your base. Leadership lesson number 2, as we look at the 2024 election cycle, is that clear vision always wins.
Nice.
Clear vision always wins. And I would say that's not just in politics, that maybe even transcends leadership. I think that's just part of being a human being. This is a craving of the human soul to have clarity of vision for my life and for my future. the biblical book of Proverbs, this book of ancient wisdom, says that without vision, people perish. In other words, people are actually dying on the inside when they don't have clarity about, what does my future look like? Where am I going? Where's my family and my business and the nation? Like all of this, like we want that sense, not so much of certainty. Like we know nothing's certain, but we want a direction. We want a trajectory that we can get on board with. And I think to just recognize, no matter what your leadership role is, clear vision always wins, because this is what people crave. I would say that it's actually better to be clear and be polarizing than to be murky and have people only get on board sort of in a half-hearted way. And I think that's what we saw play out in the election. I think President Trump's vision for the nation was absolutely polarizing, because it was so clear, it was so dialed in. And anytime that happens, by the way, vision is always polarizing. You're always gonna have people who are for it or against it. And the clearer you are, the more people will draw hard lines.
That's a good point.
But I think he had clarity, which, although it was polarizing, stood in contrast to Harris, who didn't really have clarity of vision, kind of murky, kind of cloudy. And so even people who supported her were kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They weren't like all in the way you would want your base to be. Trump had a clear vision: make America great again, right? And that became, not just a slogan and a bumper sticker and a red hat. It became a rallying cry for the nation. And the truth is that Harris had no clearly articulated vision. She may have had some good ideas. She may have had things that she wanted to accomplish, but she couldn't package it and communicate it in a way that people could resonate with.
Right.
And I think, that's what we learned from all of this. I remember Andy Stanley talking about, when you're going to lead with vision and clarity, he said, you've got to make it two things: memorable and portable. Memorable and portable. Memorable, like people can just spout it off. Like they don't have to, it's not this big laundry list of stuff that they've got to learn. It sticks in their head, and it's portable. It is a hat. It is a bumper sticker. It's something that's easily just transferred from one person to another. And again, MAGA did that. Yeah,
that's right. It did. And leadership is about messaging, not just good ideas, right? And the best leaders, they don't just have good ideas. They know how to sell it effectively.
Right.
And so in business, oftentimes entrepreneurs think that their product or their service or their thing is so good that it speaks for itself.
Right.
But in reality, they have to communicate this vision, and that will determine if people buy or buy in.
Yeah.
Okay. So an example of this would have been Steve Jobs, right? So he didn't just build great technology. He did, for sure. But he also sold a vision of innovation and taking a complex idea and making it simple.
Right.
And he did this better than anybody on the planet. And so we need a couple of ways to know if we're being clear. Number one, I think that, like you just said, if the message can't be repeated, then it's not clear.
Yep.
Right. And also, an effective leader can take a really complex idea, like Steve Jobs did, and they can distill it and make it simple and repeatable.
Yep.
And so, like MAGA, right? Make America great again.
Right. Yeah, that's a very complex idea, as we're finding out, right, in these early parts of the administration. This is not a simple thing to do, but he was able to make the message simple to get people to buy into it.
Yeah, America first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So know your base, clear vision wins. Leadership lesson number 3, which is don't stay stuck in the past. Don't stay stuck in the past. And this kind of goes back, I think, to point number 1 a little bit about knowing your base, because you have to sense where people are today, not where they were yesterday, right? Because people change and your customers change and the marketplace changes. And if you're always stuck in the past, you're not going to be able to resonate with your audience the way that you want to today. And honestly, I think this might have been one of the biggest downfalls of the Harris campaign, because she essentially just offered more of the same.
Right.
More of the same policies that the country had for the last 4 years that, quite honestly, obviously the majority of people felt like weren't really working or weren't effective the way that they wanted them to be. And, she didn't really differentiate herself much from President Biden. And I understand she's sort of in a delicate position, right? Because she's been the vice president, so some of it is actually her doing. Some of it is she's trying to show honor to her predecessor, who graciously bowed out to kind of give her a spot. And so I get that she's in a tough place with all of that. So no judgment in that regard.
Right.
Having said that, her messaging represented staying stuck right where the country had been up to this point, and it's not what the majority of people wanted. It's not what resonated with them. And so, as a leader, you have to sense when things have changed or when things are changing, or even better, when they're about to change, right? Like, you've got a little bit of a premonition around this. As the old saying goes, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
Right? And so, you've got to be able as a leader to intuit this and be able to see where this is going. I remember reading a long time ago about Henry Ford, of course, the most innovative automobile manufacturer. And even somebody that innovative still fell victim to this trap of staying stuck in the past. The story goes that, the Model T, of course, the most popular automobile ever at the time, the assembly line, all of that. And it was now, in widespread use and popular all over the nation. And people began to ask if they could get it in a different color. And Henry Ford's response was, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And that just represented he was stuck in the past. Like this is what worked. It's what got us up to this point, and he wasn't interested in changing that. And I think that just illustrates that it doesn't matter how good of a leader you are, how innovative you are. There's a tendency in all of us to get stuck in the past if we're not careful, and we've got to push back against that.
Yeah, you can't stay stuck in the past, and you can't leave your messaging in the past. So,
right.
For me, there's this big contrast between Harris and Trump. And Harris, this is not a political statement,
right.
But her message is almost, like you said, it was like pandering to her audience of, hey, we're just going to kind of do what we've been doing. But with Trump's message, it was change, right? Change was in the air.
Yep.
And it was almost tangible,
yeah.
Right? And so that's just a testament, I think, to how clear their messaging was. They clearly thought through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can't stay stuck in the past. And that's true for any business leader, right? Like, there's nothing that we're doing as entrepreneurs. If we're doing the exact same thing, the exact same way that we were a year ago, then we're already falling behind. Yep. And so I think we've always got to be kind of on the precipice of change if we're in leadership roles.
Agreed.
Number 4, leadership lesson from the 2024 election is don't be afraid to rock the boat. Don't be afraid to rock the boat. Trump was not afraid to totally upend the establishment. And really, that's kind of what he came in 2016, right? In the first term, right? Drain the swamp, right? Like, change everything, right? He's the outsider. And I think that worked so well for him. And so, we're seeing this not just in the election cycle itself, but in these first few months of the presidency, of the administration.
Right.
As we're sitting here recording today, there's all kinds of disruption, right? Like DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Yep. He's talking about buying Greenland, making Canada the 51st state, take over the Panama Canal. We're going to commandeer the Gaza Strip. Like, there's all this disruptive change. Say what you want, but this dude is not afraid to rock the boat.
Yeah, he's not afraid to rock the boat. Disrupting the Department of Education, that's another one, right? Definitely not afraid to rock the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've talked about this in episodes before, but leaders are disruptors. By their very nature, leaders are change agents. This is what we do. And so we're seeing that, again, on full display in the political realm because Trump is a disruptor. He's just coming in and being willing to change everything. Leaders are not afraid to ruffle feathers. They're not afraid to rock the boat. They're not afraid to push the envelope. They're not afraid to break the norm. And the warning in that is polarizing, right? And we're seeing that. This is polarizing in any constituency that you are leading. When you step into this arena of leadership, the arena of disruption, the arena of rocking the boat, you will not always be liked. You will have haters, you'll have critics, you'll have naysayers, you'll have to be prepared to make some enemies. And there's a good and bad. There's a shadow and a sunlight side to taking this kind of an approach in leadership. Winston Churchill, the great, wartime leader of Great Britain, said, "You have enemies? Good. That means you've stood for something at some point in your life." This is just part of high-level leadership, is that you're willing to make enemies, you're willing to have critics, you're willing to have haters. Because my position is that if everybody likes you, you're probably not really leading.
Right.
If everybody likes you, you're not really doing your job as a leader. You mentioned Steve Jobs a minute ago. One of my favorite quotes of his is that if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. right? Because being a leader by its very nature is not going to make everybody happy.
Yeah. You know, like a lot of us, I'm following the first 100 days of the presidency pretty closely.
Yeah.
And the tariffs is a pretty big one,
right?
To follow. Some are really worried that this tariff thing is an absolute, like across the board. They keep using the term across the board, but we can already see the evidence that it's strategic.
Right.
An example would be, you know, like first week of February, tariffs take effect. Justin Trudeau comes back with a 25% in response, and then 48 hours later, completely reverses it.
Right.
He's like, never mind. And by the way, you know, billion plus dollar policy on the border on our side to help you out. And then Mexico did the same thing, like something like dedicating 10,000 plus people to the border. It was obviously strategic, but everything about that was disruptive.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
There was nothing about it that was super cohesive and everybody just worked together. Like he disrupted.
Yep.
And I think that disruption and that strategy, I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. Like there was nothing cohesive about it. Everything was disruptive about it. Talk about across the board. Like there were Republicans that were against it. Of course, a lot of Democrats are against it. The economy, you know, in a short window, you know, responded negatively to it, right? So in the short run, Trump has to be willing to endure an awful lot of hate and criticism on every side of the aisle, in every sector. But because, again, he's intuitive and he has those leadership instincts, like you said, this is strategic. He's trying to get us somewhere. This is a short-term step that gets the long-term plan. And leaders just have to be willing to do that.
That's right.
And it's not always fun and it's not always pleasant. Talk about, I mean, I don't know if there's a dude on the planet who can handle more hate than Donald Trump, right? And so there's something to look up to, you know, just, you know, in regards to that altogether. Leadership lesson number 5, the last one, and then we'll kind of land the plane on this, is that people follow confidence. People follow confidence. I think there's this natural human tendency to just be drawn to self-assured leaders. We like a man with a plan, right? We want to see a leader that has strength and determination, somebody who carries themselves with confidence and with gravitas, who believes in what they're doing because that helps us believe in them and in what they're doing as well. And, you know, yes, that could be misleading sometimes, of course, but the point is that without confidence, people won't follow you. They really won't. And so I think this is just one of the big leadership lessons, that you cannot be a leader, or at least you cannot be an effective leader, if you don't embody confidence. Now, to be fair, you can have confidence with humility, and I wouldn't say that's Trump's strongest suit, you know, but we're not really talking about character traits today. We're talking about leadership. Personally, and this is just a personal preference, I can overlook a little bit of arrogance compared to trying to overlook this sort of timidness or weakness or like self-doubt or these insecurities that are on display. And I know it's a fine line. And again, we're not talking about character traits in this episode. We're talking about leadership traits. And the point here is just that leadership, confident leadership, breeds confident followers. Your followers will be more confident in you if you are confident in yourself as a leader. And so if you want your team, your clients and customers, your market to rally around you, to follow you, to take the hill with you, then you've got to be able and willing to embody and embrace and really display confidence.
Yeah, there's so much to say about confidence in leadership. I can't even think of a leader that I respect who lacks confidence.
Right.
They don't go together.
Right. I mean, it's mutually exclusive.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, to be an effective leader, you've got to be able to be bold.
Yeah.
You've got to be firm in your vision, and you got to lead with conviction.
Yeah.
Like you just said, it's better to be decisive and wrong than indecisive and stuck.
Yeah.
I think you said something to the effect. And then, of course, you know, confidence is contagious. You're right.
100%.
People who follow you, if you have confidence, the people who follow you will also have confidence. It truly is contagious.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an interesting discussion, right? And we could probably talk for a lot longer about this topic, right?
Sure.
Just things that we're seeing, that we saw through the election cycle, that we're seeing in these early days of President Trump's administration. But I think, you know, these are some of the big ones, right? Like, you've got to know your base. Clear vision really is going to win.
Right.
You can't be stuck in the past. You can't be afraid to rock the boat, and you have to have confidence. Again, just at a high level, 30,000 foot view, those are some of the observations that we have that we think are, applicable for you if you're watching or listening, because if you are in any kind of leadership role, and if you own a business, if you're an entrepreneur, you are a leader, whether you see yourself that way or not, whether you think of yourself that way or not, you are in a leadership role. And I think these are things we can bring into the business arena that we're seeing, in the political realm.
Yep.
It's interesting because I've taken a lot of flack for posting about Trump. I've lost followers, I've lost friends because people say I'm being too political. And that's interesting to me because I don't really talk or post about the politics. I talk and I post about the leadership side of it.
Right.
Because again, I see everything through the lens of leadership. It's just how I see the world. And whether you like him or not, Donald Trump is a leader. And whether you like her or not, Kamala Harris is not a leader.
Yep.
And if we believe that everything rises and falls on leadership, that is the single biggest determining factor as to why he is in the White House today and she is not. And I would say that's not a political statement.
Right.
That is just an observation of leadership. And people who understand leadership know what I'm talking about, and you know what I'm saying really is true. This is accurate, right? At the Shift Podcast, we're all about helping leaders and entrepreneurs and owners make the shift that they need to go to the next level personally and professionally. And I would just challenge you, if you don't follow politics because of all the hate and vitriol and divisiveness, I understand it, but I think you're selling yourself short on a massive opportunity to learn and grow in your leadership. And so I would just encourage you, challenge you, shift your perspective and your worldview to look at politics, but look at it through that lens. Look at it through the lens of leadership, and begin to just distill, almost in the daily news, the lessons that you can learn and apply in your business, in your company, and in your industry. Thanks for being with us on this episode of the Shift Podcast. If you made it all the way through, hopefully we didn't offend you too much. Although we're actually okay offending you a little. If we don't say anything that bothers you, then maybe we're not doing our jobs either. So, but we're glad that you stuck with us today. Hey, if this episode was helpful for you, we'd love it if you would like it, share, subscribe, drop us a comment, anything that you can do to maybe kind of help us get the word out, but also help other entrepreneurs and leaders grow in what they're doing. Because at the end of the day, I think there's enough room for all of us to win, and everybody gets better when the leader gets better. That's what Craig Rochelle always says. I love that statement. So we want to help you get better, and we hope the Shift is able to do that. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you next time.